So the day's finally here. Mozaik version 14 is officially released and available to download from the Mozaik forum. I wanted to start this video by just going through and explaining the overall theme of the Mozaik version 14 release, while also touching on what some of the new features are in the new version, and just give you an overall sort of informal walkthrough so you can get a bit of an idea what the new features are and why you should perhaps upgrade from version 13.1 to version 14. And if you're brand new to Mozaik or haven't seen it before, this is going to be a great video to watch to highlight some of the progression and what's new in Mozaik. So let's kick this off. I'll explain as well that we will be releasing version 14 training videos. So Bill is working away at creating some really in-depth, detailed training videos that are going to walk you through the overall detailed use case of each of these new features. This video is more of an overview. So if you really don't have time, or you just kind of want to get a bit of gauge on what's new, maybe sit down with a coffee or a glass of wine or something like that and just walk through what these new features are, then this is the perfect video for you. And I'm going to sort of start by explaining that version 14 is really based around the theme of improving the overall visual impact of Mozaik. So most of you will know that the majority of Mozaik customers are manufacturers, right? So they're people that are using this for a manufacturing purpose, whether you're cutting it out on a panel or a table saw, or you're running to a CNC machine, or you're a full enterprise shop. Your primary focus is on building. However, when you think about this, quite often, the majority of you still need to visually display an accurate and professional drawing to your end client. And that's where version 14 has really, the focus for us has been on version 14 is giving you the tools to achieve that, right? And when we sort of sat down to look at, what are the things that we need to do, overall it started with, adding on a rendering option, but it also then snowballed into improving the overall 3D viewer. And then to do all of that, well, we needed to touch on materials and textures and CAD and annotations and a lot of different elements. And all of this is going to be pulled together into what you see today. So I've got a 3D view open here. And as you can see, this is just the generic 3D viewer. I'm inside Mozaik. So this is not a render. This is a 3D viewer. I can pan around and zoom in and out. And what I wanted to highlight by showing you this is what's changed, how much this has improved from a prior version. So I'm kind of going to start there, right? So let's take a look at this. Let's have a look. What we're seeing is we're seeing reflections on the countertop. We're seeing, a glossy finish on that countertop. We're seeing reflections and a metallicness on the brass lights and the brass chairs. We're also seeing like subtle reflections on the splashback, and we've got transparency for the sheer curtains in the background. All of these things weren't previously achievable or possible in our 3D viewer. So huge step forward, right? And to visually display this, of the difference between version 13.1 and version 14, I'm going to dive into this new dialog here called the room settings. And this is opened up on my other screens. I'm going to drag this across. So this is the room render settings. And I'm going to show you what version 13 looked like by pretty much turning the majority of these things off. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to ramp up ambient all the way, and I'm going to turn line opacity all the way as well. And you'd pretty much also really take away your ambient occlusion. And that will give you like a pretty close representation of what version 13.1 looked like. So a lot of changes here that all tied together to really make this so much more realistic, okay? And what I want to do there is walk you through each of these individual things so you can kind of see them and get a gauge for how they work. Now, I'm going to start with the line opacity. Now, in version 13.1 or previous versions of Mozaik, it was either on or off, right? And so what we've done now is give you the ability to dial in exactly where you want that to be. Now I'm going to show you it's on all the way right now, okay? And as you can see, it kind of gives it that little bit cartoonish type view where what we're seeing is we're seeing the kind of really heavy lines, but it's, it's quite clear and easy to define. And then if you go to off, well, then you're losing really you're losing all of the lines, right? You're not getting that kind of detail. So you want that to land somewhere in between the two, right? And like where you want to dial that in, well, that's a personal preference. So you might want to really have it quite subtle. You just might want to slide that along until you feel like that's the right amount of line weight to give the depth of like the shaker profiles and the information that you want to convey to your customers. So personal preference choice, and great news is you can save these defaults once you've dialed it in the way you want. You can also play with the width of the line as well to get, an overall kind of like line weight thickness on those lines. But it's really the line opacity that you'll probably want to dial in. Coming down, I'm going to show you ambient occlusion. So if you look at this, you'll see really where you're going to see this play out is in the shadows and the corners. So like you can see the dial that way up, right? Just to exaggerate this, what you're going to see, everywhere where like two surfaces meet, think of the corner of your room. If you're sitting in a room right now, look in the very corner of your room, you're going to see shadows, and one section of the wall, like it's going to look darker right in the corner, like you can see here, right? And then you can fade that off. So you can fade it, I can basically take it to the extreme level of just showing like no fade, or fade it right back. And again, these are allowing you to dial in what you want them to be while also increasing, decreasing in size. All of these are going to be quite subtle changes, but you're really dialing that back to a level where you're comfortable with what that's showing you, and you're getting a kind of nice balance between all of it. So again, dial that one in how you see fit. Sticking to the right-hand side of the view, I'm going to talk about the view right now. So like you've got the field of view perspective. So what that allows you to do is change your camera angle. So think about like a lot of photography you'll see in the kitchens that you're probably making, or the furniture or whatever it is that you're making. You'll see a lot of photographers will come in and use a wide-angled lens to get more of the view in the scene. So now you've got the ability to change your field of view. You could narrow the field of view, or you can open up the field of view just by changing that. I've got it defaulted to 35, which would be like the equivalent of like 35 degrees or a 35mm lens, which is like a typical what your eyes see type scenario. So think of it like that. And then you've got your draw mode, whether you want to see this in wire, hidden, or filled. Coming across to the left, we've got the ambient light function. As I mentioned, that is in version 13.1 was all the way. It was just basically on, really. You can dial that right down. You can see I can get right down to like no light, which is now just seeing the light coming in through the windows at the back there. The biggest change in version 14, what you're going to notice really is the introduction of that HDRI image. So HDRI stands for High Dynamic Range Image. And what this is, think about like your room being wrapped in a sphere, like a ball, right? And the inside of that ball contains an image that is lighting your scene. Sounds really complicated. Good news is you don't really need to do much. Really, I'm going to recommend just ramping the HDRI all the way up and then selecting the type of HDRI image you want to use. In my particular scene, I've gone with one where I've got a background outside the window, and then what you're seeing there is I'm seeing that here. Okay, so I'm seeing the window reflections come through on my countertop, so I'm just seeing that play out, right? So think about if you don't really want to have like a scene like this, we are supplying like some default ones. So there's going to be like a default HDRI image, which you're not really going to then see a scene outside the window, but you are going to get really, different amounts of light pouring into the scene. And as you sort of pivot around, you're going to get, the different reflections from that light. But it's also just going to naturally kind of light this in a very easy, pleasing way that would look really good in any scene. So that default HDRI is going to be quite a great option. Good news is if you just Google like HDRI free download, there's plenty of websites where you can download different ones for free and play around with I guess your own versions of these things as well. So coming down, you've also got your camera, so you can dial in and up the camera as well, again to a level that feels comfortable to you. Again, that's just another form of lighting, like lighting from where your camera perspective is. And then tone mapping will overall just, you'll see down on the floor here, it's quite kind of washed out because of the amount of light. And what you're doing is you're kind of recovering some of that tone. So you're just recovering the depth and of the the floor there. So the kind of blown out areas, think of it as like, recovering the overexposed kind of areas of the scene. So then from all of that, you can increase the brightness of the HDRI. So you make the room brighter, make the room darker as well, depending on what type of look you want to go for. And that might be a very personal thing. You can also change the specular scale and the size of the sphere. So think of it like 1 as it's just encompassing the room. If I'd like to sort of push that sphere further away, maybe move the foreground of that image back to have, and it really lowers the intensity of the overall appearance of the HDRI, then you can do that as well. Recommend just starting with them all on 1. So, we've got some nice default settings there that are going to be preloaded for you that is going to make that nice and easy to get a really good scene. But as you can see, like what an improvement the overall 3D viewer experience is from, version 13 to version 14. Now, coming through, let's take a look at some of the other kind of 3D viewer experience improvements. And the biggest one for me has to be like navigating. So what I mean by that is now you've got the ability to navigate directly to where your mouse is. So, if I want to orbit around this vase on the countertop here, I just click and it will orbit and pivot around from that location. If I want to pivot from this handle over here, well, now I click there and it's going to pivot and orbit based on that location. That combined with the ability to zoom to your cursor just makes the overall experience of the 3D viewer just so much better. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say I want to look inside that coffee mug. That would have been really hard to do, almost impossible to do in version 13, right? But now let's do that. So we're just going to zoom towards the coffee mug. I'm going to click and pivot, and I'm going to zoom further in, and then let's click and pivot one more time. And there's a little Easter egg for you. Hey, Bill. Thanks for popping in. So just to give you a bit of an idea, just how detailed you can be with some of these sort of things. I'm just going to switch back to my previous view. You can zoom through walls now as well, which is really cool. But I can get down to the detail of going, what, I just want to see what's inside this vase. So, you could hide little Easter eggs for your clients to see, for example. But overall, I think that just gives you the idea that, you can really dial this in and get a pretty damn good perspective. So I've gone outside the room now and I'm looking through the windows, back in, through the shears into this room. So pretty cool. Overall, you can get a really good perspective. Of course, you can save all these views. That way, once you've got a view dialed in, you can easily come back to it. Now, the other kind of major thing that you'll notice is you've got the ability to control SketchUp textures. And what I mean by that is previously the way SketchUp models worked in Mozaik was that the texture was set in SketchUp. The biggest restriction of that is if you don't have a SketchUp subscription, well, you weren't able to change the appearances of those things. And it was time consuming, right? Like if someone just said, I'll just change the fabric on that chair to be, this other fabric, or change can you make the table, not look like that shade of timber? I want it to look like something else. Or, more common examples like, well, my faucet or tap is not brass, it's black. Or, I want to see the handles in a different finish, whatever it is. Let's take a look at that now, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller, and I'm going to navigate over to the settings. And I'm going to go to my texture settings. Now, looking at textures overall, this has changed. And we will get into this in the video today as well, where we're going to talk about materials. And I've started here on the 3D viewer as I think it's sort of explaining that really this is like all of these things that have changed are really going into this experience. So I'm kind of working a little bit backwards in a sense of compared to how our release notes would look on this. But I want to sort of paint the picture of why these things have changed and what benefit you get from them. So let's have a look here, right? I've got my hardware set to a brass metal. I've got my faucet set to a brass metal. Let's go ahead and just change this to a black metal, okay? So I'm going to make that a black metal, and straight away like that, my faucet is now a black metal. So easy, right? You can, of course, click and look at other images, like you might want to make it a chrome, or you can assign this and just change it on the fly. And that is just it's hard to understate the power of that and just how easy that is to do. But not just faucets and taps and appliances and things. It's also for anything you bring into Mozaik. So right now I've brought in this nice modern looking metal bar stool, and I've mapped the appearance of the metal part of the stool to my hardware setting. So if I go here and make this a black metal as well, then those stools are going to update to a black metal. Let's say I want to change the fabric. Well, I've mapped the fabric to upholstery, meaning that now if I want to see them in this different appearance, well, go ahead and just change that and you'll see that update. So I think I'll just do that again. I'll just pick a different one. There you go. So you've got all these different options in here that you can go ahead and choose from, and we're supplying a whole bunch of these in version 14 that you can download from the new import updated data. More on that soon. But from a few quick changes, you can control those things right down to the details of, like, I also mapped the handles on this SketchUp model of this nice side table to my hardware. I've mapped the appearance of the furniture to furniture. So now I can go ahead and change the appearance of that. I've mapped the top of this to my accent color. So let's say I don't want that to be an aged leather, but I want it to be, let's say, a different style of color of aged leather. Whatever it is, you can go through and change these things. So go ahead and pick one, and that'll go ahead and change. So just incredibly flexible, powerful stuff to give you the overall visual impact and appearance that you want this job to have. If you think about that, that's just really opening up the realm of what you can do, show, and convey in Mozaik. And all of that can be controlled in SketchUp models. Again, we'll go through this in training videos, but simple as mapping your SketchUp model to point to hardware or to point to plumbing. And it can also be controlled simply by the product type. And again, I won't go into the very specifics of that, but just know that it can be done, and quite simply as well. You've also got this little hidden gem in the bottom right hand corner called set up textures, where when you come into this area, you can control all the appearance of all of these things, right? So, I've got all these different floor colors and different wall colors and different graphics colors. And each of those you can determine the appearance. And this is like a major change in the materials, and we'll kind of get into this as well. But you've got the ability to set a sheen, whether it's like a flat satin, semi-gloss, high gloss, or clear glass, or a frosted glass. It gives you the ability to control these things, as well as control the transparency and the metallicness. So if we had a look here, you've just got all these different ones. I've created the material just called chalk white shears for my curtains at the back there, and I've got them on an 80% transparency, so I can see through them, but they're not completely see through. They're just like semi-transparent. So you've just got so much flexibility of creating not just your own textures, but then controlling the way those textures look in the 3D space, and overall then how the render is going to appear from that. And you've got the ability there as well to jump in and create little overrides. Think of these as like I've said anything that's got the word pendant in it is going to be mapped to electrical. So you can go ahead and you can create SketchUp material replacements, meaning that if something in SketchUp's called something and you don't have the facilities of getting into SketchUp to change that, well, you can remap it within Mozaik. So overall, just an incredible amount of new control in version 14 when it comes to the 3D viewer and the experience. And I haven't even gone through all of that. Like what you can see here is that you've also got like different modes to look around or to walk, into the space. But I think overall, once you experience the new kind of way of navigating through that space, there's no going back. So while we're in this, let's have a quick look at the rendering. So cloud rendering for Mozaik is an add-on. So it is an available add-on option that you can add to your subscription. If you have a look on the website, you'll see the options for it. it is priced per company, meaning that you only need to pay for the add-on once and you'll get it on all of your seats. So that's a real big advantage. For all the specifics and details, please go to the website and have a look at the options for rendering. You can also log into your Cyncly account and add your rendering option to your subscription right away. So let's take a look at this, right? I'm going to click the render button. Now this is going to open a dialog, and you can see here I've got some previous examples here. Basically it says ready to render. I mean, what it's going to do, you can save all your different scenes and views and you can render multiple scenes at once. Okay, so you don't need to render one scene at a time. You could save 5, 6, 10, however many scenes you need, and then just click render and you're going to render all of those scenes. Now, just to give you a bit of an idea, I'm going to go ahead and double click on this view one, and I can obviously just open it up like this, or I can double click and it will open up in my Windows Photos app, and that's just going to give you a better idea of the quality. Now this was just set to like a I think it was a HD 1920 by 1080 quality. Now, the subtleties in this, you're seeing like the reflections coming through, the light coming through from the back windows there. You're getting like the light illuminating from the lamp in the corner, the LED strip illuminating light. You're getting reflections on my it's like a satin mirrored kick, toe kick. You're also getting the shininess of the metal, the background image on that HDRI showing in the background. And the best part of this is just how easy it is to achieve. So, I've messed around with this scene in the video so far, but just to give you an idea, let's go ahead and select this scene. I'm just going to go ahead and press render, just to give you a bit of an idea of the time that takes. So the very first time you do this, it is going to ask you to log in as well. So it's going to ask you to log into your Cyncly account, and that way if you have rendering enabled, well then you'll be able to utilize this new feature as well. So I'm just going to pause for a second while I enter my password, get logged in, and then we'll check out the rendering. Okay, so now that I'm all logged in, what you're going to see is that I've clicked render. You'll see the status bar over here showing you what's happening. So it's currently preparing, and what it's doing now is uploading the scene. So it's uploading the overall scene as a model. It's uploading the textures that are also associated to the scene. It's uploading the lighting information. It's uploading all that content to the cloud. So this is a cloud rendering solution. It's uploading all this information, and then once it's all uploaded, and the time that takes really depends on your local connection speed and how big and how many models are in the scene and that kind of information. You see about 10 to 15 seconds of that, and now it's actually rendering. So we can see the rendering process takes a similar amount of time, again, depending on how many scenes you're rendering. Good news is you don't have to wait for this. You can minimize this, come back to it, and get on with drawing your job. You don't actually have to wait for that at all. It can just be something that you do in the background and then go back to drawing. So it is independent, and the great news is it does not impact your computer speed at all. It's in the cloud. So, it's not putting any additional strain on your computing power or resources. You don't need a crazy good computer to be able to do it because, again, it's in the cloud. It's not rendering on your local computer. Great news is it means you don't need an expensive graphics card to be able to do this and produce a high quality rendered image. So, all of that said, I think the beauty of doing this in the cloud is A, it's quicker. B, it means, you don't have to have the expensive computer set up and resources available, and you can just get on with drawing while it's happening in the background. Rendering's done. It's now downloading the image, and that's ready to download. And here we go. Image has been produced. So there's coming back to it right here. So in kitchen number version 2, I've got here. There you go. You've got the the chrome tap and the black hardware, the black handles now. The fabric's changed. All those little changes that I made. And when you see the display in Mozaik, it's it's downgraded slightly, like it's just and when you open it up, you'll see the full version. You can like zoom in on that, and depending on the quality that you set, you can determine, how big a quality that is. That way it determines, the overall impact. But overall, super easy and efficient to get a nice high quality render without the expensive hardware. So we think you're going to love that. And overall, the next thing I want to point out there in the like what's new with rendering aspect is the ability to export these things, right? So cool thing is you can go ahead and you can set up a title block. So if you've got a title block already for multi-print, you may want to use that one. You probably want to design one specifically for exporting renders. Like think of it like this, that, you might not want to go through and produce your typical floor plan, 3D elevation. Maybe you're just trying to sell the kitchen, or the project, and you just don't want to actually give a floor plan and elevation with dimensions to make it easier for the next person. Maybe you just want to give them, the nice rendered images and say, there you go, this is what you're getting. And you can provide floor plans once they've signed up, however you want to do it. But the ability to just go ahead and assign a title block, press OK, choose where your title block goes, and then print that off means that you can automatically take all your rendered images and just have a nice PDF, printed out, ready to go, ready to email to your client with all your title block information on there. So overall, like those changes with 3D viewer and rendering, I'm going to sort of now pivot and dive into the material aspect of it to help you understand like how is this happening in the background, what's happening with my materials, and let's do that. So let's jump out of there for a second. And actually one little thing before I do, I'm going to go into products, and I'm just going to show you this elevation of this wall here, right? One of my favorite features of version 14 is this option now to have your mode set to filled with texture color. Okay, like the impact of that is crazy. I'm gonna have to show you like for a night and day difference what version 13 is, right? So if you look at just filled with color, that's version 13. Okay, so this beigey, peachy sort of color was for everything, right? So it was just so hard to know. And even more than that, actually, like the textures, the models weren't displayed as clearly in version 13 as well. So it's not even a true representation. But the main thing is, when you look at this, you don't know that these cupboards are painted like that sage green color and that these are all white. So you'd have to try and convey that to your clients or show them the 3D and say, kind of ignore that. Or, what most people were probably doing was just going to a hidden line view and not showing color. But now we got the ability to fill that with the color. Okay. And then like that's night and day difference. It's so clear for the customer to understand, the cabinets at the top are this sage green color. The cabinets everywhere else are a white finish. It's just that easy and that clear. You've also got the ability in your drawing settings to dial in like what the fade percentage is. So think of this as like, if I was to go, let's just go like 80%, right? And jump out of there. So you can see I've really faded that off. I mean, I'm only getting kind of like 20% of that green coming through. You might be thinking, why do you want to do that? Well, like depending on the color, you probably want it like by default around 25%. But maybe you're doing a really, like for example, I could go down to 0 and it would just be solid, that color, which on some jobs, fine. That's actually true representation of that color. However, if that was a black color, well, you're not going to see your annotation lines or your dimensions or anything like that. So, you're probably going to want to fade it to some degree. And we find about 25% is a really, really nice amount that just also means like, when you're printing this out, it's not super heavy. It's a nice balanced amount. You kind of see I've sort of dived into one of the other areas there, which is our drawing settings. So I might as well talk a little bit about this before we actually jump into the materials and textures. And our drawing template editor is a brand new thing in version 14. And what it is allowing you to dial in your plan dimensions, your elevation dimensions, and your settings, and get that looking the way you want it to look, get the orthographic view, get the face and interior, get it all dialed in. You've got all of your layers at the bottom here. You can control the fonts and the line weights and what's turned on and off. You can control all the information in one place. and you're getting this nice big preview, so you get a bit of an idea of just a generic room, what that's going to look like, and what changes are going to make. So and we've also introduced more dimension properties, like if you want to go ahead and put a line with an arrow instead of the hash option, or you want to do like a closed arrow instead of that. You've got a few more options there. You can go ahead and choose whether you want the positions centered between the dimension lines, or you want to position them outside, and you can change your padding, so you can, I'd recommend really increasing these and bumping these out, but you can kind of like go ahead and dial these in to get them to the right level that you feel comfortable with of how you want them to look. But you can play around with it in one place, and you can also set a brand new option called multi-print scale. And on all of these kind of options where you can set something, you've got the ability to set a multi-print font point. Now, confusing to explain what that is, and I'm sure Bill's going to do a much better job of that than me. But I guess my generic way of explaining it is when you zoom in and you zoom out, if you were using, let's just actually change it quickly just to show you this. It's probably the simplest way to do it. I'm just going to look at the dimensions on the floor plan. I've got it set to multi-print font points, but let's go back and just change it to font points. Okay. So now what you'll see when I zoom in, it's kind of trailing off. The lines are getting closer together. I'm trying to zoom in on the number to get a better read of the number, but it's not really doing that. Like, it's kind of trailing off and suppressing in, and that was kind of the experience in version 13, and we really wanted to fix that and improve that overall. So what multi-print font points does is sort of applies the scale that you've got set in multi-print and keeps things really consistent. So now when I zoom in here, you can see those lines are not compressing tighter together. They're staying really consistent. It's just making it so much easier. You can also see, like, you can have settings to, like, turn and hide the number off, or, you can have it set and have it pop to the outside and those kinds of things. But overall, it's just like such a cleaner experience to do that. And you can, you get the same thing on floor plan and elevation. So just where these things are really easy to control. And I think overall, like, once you go through and you get all of that dialed in, and we're going to supply some templates, so you could download a template that has these presets. So here's this one I've mucked around with. And again, I just think overall, it's just so much cleaner. Like, we're not getting like the lines increasing or decreasing. You're getting a really consistent experience throughout. And we're going to supply some that just make that so much easier for you overall. So look forward to getting some feedback and information on that. So let's now pivot and take a look at materials and textures. And then we're going to kind of come back and look at CAD and annotations and multi-print changes and things like that. So let's jump in. We'll go to libraries and materials. And I'm going to first of all explain that, like, all of the materials that you got in version 13 are just going to go preloaded into version 14. Okay, so you just open it up with doing nothing, everything will be the same as it was. So you won't really have anything better or worse off there. You do have the ability now down the bottom to add subheaders, and I've gone ahead and added one called default materials and just moved that to the top. That way I can easily collapse my older sort of materials from version 13 and go ahead and create these new materials that we call dynamic materials. Okay, so a dynamic material, think of it as like it's a smart material. Easiest way for me to explain it is it's sort of like it automatically creates new materials based on the texture that you select. Okay, so when you select a texture, it's going to spawn a new material. Sounds confusing. It's actually really cool. Let me walk you through it. So I'm going to click on one that I've created, Polytech 16 millimeters. Polytech's a common material supplier here. It could be Egger in other countries. It could be Laminex. It could be anything. TFL, depending on what, wherever you get your prefinished materials from, right? It's a supplier, okay? I have an option for my name. I've just named this material Polytech 16 millimeters, and I've got a cut list name, Polytech 16 millimeter, and then in the curly brackets, we've got the word texture. Now what that does is it's going to insert the texture name into the cut list name in that location. So when I select a texture in my job, it's then going to be called Polytech 16 millimeter texture name. So in this example, I've set my default material to this Adriatic Smooth, which means that now I'm going to get Polytech 16mm Adriatic Smooth as my material. So, and if I select a different material texture, then I'm going to get a different material cut list name, and it's going to separate the materials and separate all the components, which means you've just, with the one material, you could spawn as many material textures as you like, which is so powerful and flexible when you really think about it. So highlights on some of these things of what's new. Obviously, this whole material properties area that I'm looking at on the side here is all new. Okay, so previously it was just all in the columns here. A lot more information to display to you now, so we wanted to make that easier to digest, and by doing that, we've put this in the material properties. You'll see the main kind of thing, and the major change is that textures are now assigned to the material. Okay, so previous version, you'll see that, you selected a material, but the texture was not really in any way associated or locked to that material that you selected. It was a separate selection. So it means you could have selected like a veneer material or a wood grain material, and then applied a paint color, and completely unrelated. Just that concept from most people when they're brand new to Mozaik was super confusing to understand. Like, well, I've selected wood grain. Why does it look like this? Or I've selected a paint color. Why does it look like a wood grain? I guess combining those two might take a little bit of getting used to if you've used Mozaik for a long time. Promise you, once you get used to it, you will not want to go back. There is so many advantages to it, but it will take a little bit of adjusting to fully comprehend that. But we hope that you can see the advantages in like what I'm displaying in this video, and also, overall kind of just some of these changes, right? Like, so you can see that I've got the ability to make this two-sided or single-sided. So I can have a back finish, if you're using a material that's got a different appearance on two different surfaces, well, you can do that. You can go ahead and display the edge, which is so cool. I mean, you can have a particle board or an MDF or a, plywood edge or whatever it is that you need to do, and show that visually. Amazing. And it just makes, I guess, and I'm just going to jump out and show you this. Like, let's just look at an overhead cabinet, right? I'm just going to go into edit and view this in 3D. You really need to see this for it to fully make sense, right? Let's have a look at this. So what we're seeing, and again, you've got the same, just to touch on this, you've got the same kind of like options in here where you can control HDRI and lighting and ambient lighting and textures and all that sort of, like all of that control that I showed you before is also available to set how you want it to look on an individual product. But getting back to the edge, right? As you can see, it's so clear to know that I haven't edged the top or the back or the bottom of this, right? And let's just hide the doors for a second. So I'm going to go into my layers, and I'm just going to turn the doors off. I'm going to go into high detail mode as well, so you can see all the operations. So clear to look at this and know I've edged everything that I wanted edged. Or maybe, I've got an under panel under this, so I don't need to edge the underside, but maybe you're not going to put an under panel and you wanted to pick up on that. Beauty of this is that, you can quickly check, and, you can quickly check this not just on an individual product, but maybe an individual wall or an entire elevation or an entire sort of floor plan, sorry. So, quickly I can go, yep, none of that's edged, cool. Yeah, I've got my under panel there, so I don't need to edge that there. You can see, where you haven't got edging as well. So, it just gives you a real quick, and this is kind of what I was talking about at the start of the video really, is like, you need this level of visual control to just know that you're going to get, an accurate, information off your machine. And that's like just such a powerful thing. And not just that, like, you can go ahead and, I can go into this end and go into edit and edit my band in. And let's just say I want to go ahead. I'll touch on this as well, that we've improved or increased the number of band-in. So we've previously had 4 options, and now you've got up to 6 options. Another cool thing is that you can actually go into the parts library and assign what you want them to be. So, the way I sort of treat my band-in is like, number 1 is for the cabinet edges, number 2 is for shelves, number 3 is for doors, and number 4 is for drawer boxes. You can set that up however you please, but generically that's the way I'm doing it, right? So I'm going to go, yeah, okay, look, I want to edge the bottom of the cabinet in my cabinet edge, or maybe I want to do it in the same color as the doors, depending on what I'm doing, right? But I think just even the ability to give that a friendly name just makes so much sense, because you know exactly what you're going to be getting then. But, you know, just by making that change and then checking the product, I can see that that's edged on that edge, you know, versus not edged. Just so clear and easy to understand. So, you know, all these changes kind of all intertwined towards improving the overall experience on such a scale. Now, from a material, you'll see that I've got this group, right? A material texture groups, and you'll see the option in the material library called texture groups. Pretty major new feature, right? What this is the ability to define your own groups, and we're going to have these available over the coming weeks for different suppliers that you can just download straight from the import updated data, which is all improved as well, and I'm going to show you that as well shortly. So much that is new, it's really hard to know kind of which direction to walk you through this in, so I'm just kind of free flying it here to give you a bit of a, like, honestly, an unrehearsed sort of walkthrough, because I feel like that's the best way for this to come across, in the sense of like the scale and the amount of things that have improved and changed. As I go through this, I'm going to think of more things, right? And that's just the nature of how many things are in this update. But okay, getting back to the texture groups. So you'll see every material texture that you already had in Mozaik is going to go straight into a group called default. Okay. If you install Mozaik brand new, and straight off the bat, we're going to supply you with all these nice default materials, textures. And I believe they'll also come through in the update. If not, you can download them. But what you'll see here is that you've got like a varying degree. We try to keep these quite generic for the default ones. You know, they're varying shades from white through to neutrals, and then through to like grays and darks, and then through to blues and greens, and, you know, reds and yellows and ambers and different colors, right? It's walking you through like a color spectrum, just so you've got a really good option, no matter what the supplier you get in your material, no matter what painter you're using or paint supplier you're using, there'll be an option in there with a fairly generic name that is going to be close to what you need to display without needing to do anything, right? However, if you want to bring in that supplier's actual paints, no problem. That's what texture groups are for. So we've also put in, you know, a nice collection of wood grains and different timber finishes. So you've got a nice collection there as well in the default group. So you've also then got the ability to import in different options, and you can do this from the import updated data. And I'm just going to show you like one that I've created, again, Australian supplier, so don't shoot me for that. But the texture group here, and I'm just going to expand this out a little bit. It's all of these options. I'm just going to start at the top. Probably really easy to explain this, right? You can have the image. You can have the image twice, right? So Adriatic is available in a smooth finish and a vignette finish. Alabaster is available in a gloss, a matte, a sheen, and a smooth. Okay, so I've assigned the gloss to high gloss. So that way, when I look at this in my 3D, I'm going to get a high gloss appearance, and my renders are going to look like high gloss. A matte I've assigned to flat, and satin, sheen I've gone satin, smooth I've gone satin. Again, you might want to, you know, go semi-gloss, whatever you want to do. It's you've got the ability to control it. You've also got the ability to, and we're in the process of setting these up, so they're not all kind of done and ready, but they will be available for download shortly. And you'll see here that you've got the ability to also control whether this material has a grain, okay? And with the grain, it can either be a grain, meaning like, you know, you order that as a standard sheet where the grain runs along the length of the sheet or the longest edge of the sheet, or it could be a cross grain. So you're not rotating the image here. Think of it as the way you order the material. You either buy it as a standard grain or you buy it as a cross grain. And that's what you're choosing here. You're choosing which way you buy that. But by assigning this as grain, you can see I've got grain by texture enabled here. That gives you the control that Mozaik knows that when that same material, remembering that my material is called Polytech 16mm, we don't know if that material has grain or not. And that doesn't matter because it's now controlled by the texture. So if I assign, let's say, the Amaro option, which is just a solid color, doesn't have grain. It can be rotated any which way we want on the nest. However, if I assign this an Antico oak wood mat, it has grain. Mozaik knows to keep the grain in the direction of the material, which just means that you don't need to muck around with this, right? It just gives you, it makes it easy that you can have one material. You don't need to have like a color 1, color 2, color 3, grain 1, grain 2, grain 3, like all of that's gone. You can have these dynamic materials, smart materials that are like updating and spawning new materials based on all of this control. So this is just, is really going to open up the doors for you to have different groups for different things. It might be paints, it might be stains, it might be material suppliers, and it probably will be all of those things in reality. You're probably going to want to have one for your different paint suppliers, for your different stain suppliers, and it gives you the ability to dial this in, control the look, appearance, sheen, name, abbreviated material name, whether it has grain, and even pricing. You can price here via sheet. Okay, so I can put a sheet cost on. And the cool thing is, like when you think about ordering from a supplier for pre-finished materials, these are all different sheet costs, right? Like, a gloss might be let's just say $200 a sheet, whereas matte might be $120 a sheet. Like whatever it is, you can control it here based on the texture, and you can have multiple copies of the same texture. Again, opening up another degree of what you can do with materials and textures in version 14. So honestly, like so much here. You can control transparency, you control the metallicness of a material, which can really give it a different like vibrancy and warmth to the material as well. Obviously for metals, but can also be used for wood grain. And I think it looks really good on a wood grain because it gives it a real like, it kind of adds like a bit of clarity and a bit of warmth to the wood grain and makes it feel a bit more realistic. Again, my interpretation, but you can control it how you like. So overall, material texture groups gives you the ability to organize and sequence your groups and control those textures and control how you want them priced and the appearance of them and everything like that. And then you can lock them, the groups, to a material. So I've got a option here called Polytech 16mm locked to my Polytech 16mm group. The reason why I've separated them is with Polytech, for example, some materials or textures are available in 16mm and some are only available in 18mm. So not all are available in both. So I've decided to split out the material and split out the texture groups to make that easy so I can't mess that up. Meaning that when I choose this in a job, if I choose my Polytech 16mm material, well, I'm only going to be displayed the textures that are actually able to be ordered for 16mm. And if I supply Polytech 18mm, well, then I'm only going to be able to choose from the textures that are available in 18mm. Again, just another fail-safe way of like, stopping me from making a mistake there. Next aspect of this I'm also going to point out is that when you look at like a standard material, like, think about like what you build your cabinet boxes, carcass, cabinets out of, right? In Australia, it's like white melamine, white HMR, majority, 99% of the time. In America, that's pre-finished plywood, right? It's a plywood material, probably 3/4 plywood. In different, in UK, it's probably like 18mm melamine. Depending on where you go, what you make it out of changes. Okay, and point of like explaining that is you don't want every material to be dynamic, because sometimes a material is just that. It never changes. It is just locked to that appearance. So you've got the option here to lock a texture and say, look, you know what? My white HMR 16mm material is always going to be white. It can't be anything else. And I don't need to put in my texture flag so it can change and spawn new materials. It is what it is. So you get the ability to really like lock that down and control that. And then you're going to see all this in reality of how it plays out, right? So let's jump in and we're going to go into libraries and material templates. And I'm going to take a quick look at a cabinet material template. And let's look at one called Polytech 16mm. So what you're seeing here is all of the different materials, and the majority of parts in here, for me, that I'm always going to build out of my white HMR. You can see straight away they're gray on the side because the texture's locked. The texture's not going to follow what the job's doing. It's going to be locked to the white HMR material texture. So we're just visually displaying that with the shading to make it really clear and easy to understand. And then I've got certain parts that are just set to my Polytech material, like my finished hands, my finished backs, my toe faces, any of those components that I would consider to be an exterior facing material, I've set to that Polytech 16mm material, which then the texture is not locked. It will change and spawn according to the job, right? So for this to make sense, let's just go ahead and do a real quick room. I'm just going to go room number 3 here, and I'm going to go in and just, quick room, quick product, and drop a couple of products on the wall here to take a look at. And let's go to settings, and let's go to materials, and let's talk about materials. So first of all, doors, I can drop this down and choose Polytech 16mm. You'll also notice the little plus button there. So you can set all of your doors, base wall, tall, all at once, all to the same material. Or you can expand it out and say, wall cabinets are painted, and they're going to be painted whatever color. So you can go ahead and do that on the fly. You can also click on the image and then go browse your images. Maybe you want to go ahead and pick a particular image. You can also change tall as well. Previously, you never had the ability to set tall, and tall was just, it was base or wall, depending on, height, location, splits, a whole bunch of things. But now you can set tall to be the way you want it to be. And that's for everything. You can see cabinet, same thing, expand it out, change it to what you want. It will be same as base by default unless you want to make it different. And we feel like that gives you the best of both worlds. It allows you to change it quicker because you don't have to change base and wall, but it also introduces the new option of tall without being annoying, without giving you another thing to select. Hopefully you can see that as the best of both worlds type scenario. All right. If something's been overridden, you'll see it in the pale blue to indicate that it's an override. Another impact or change here is that you can edit these things on the fly, which just is so cool. A lot of people have really wanted that for a long time, meaning that if just in this one job, my adjustable shelves need to be a different material, maybe they need to be out of 25mm material, whatever it is, you can go ahead and, I'm just going to make them out of 25mm black, for example. You can change something within one template without making a new template. You're just modifying the current template only for this job, which again is just another layer and degree of how much we've overhauled and improved materials in version 14. When you improve something, you kind of want to go what are all the things that we need to do, and this is kind of why I guess the release of version 14 has been pushed back a little bit from where we originally hoped it would be, because when you get into an area, you really want to just spend as much time in that one area and improve all the things at the same time. And I guess there's a bit of mission creep, but overall, I'm confident that in watching this video, if you've made it this far, that you're going to see why. So let's go ahead and now look at my example of how this will change, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and say, look, my first one, let's browse this different way. I'm going to say, look, my first one is, it doesn't really matter what I select, but I'm going to say Cinder Matte, okay? And I'm going to go in here and take a look at this on the fly. So there's, my beautiful elevation showing the texture color. And let's select this one and right click and go override material. And again, I can change this. So let's go ahead and make this one Empire Oak, okay? Or like what we're seeing there is that they're probably two very similar tone materials, so not getting a great example. Let's go ahead and choose a lighter color. So what you're seeing there, two different colors, obviously, but previously, you would have had to have a color one and a grain one to achieve that, right? And then it becomes the problem of how do you explain that to the guys on the shop floor of what are you cutting this material out of? And you've remembered to change the texture, but didn't remember to change the material, and you end up cutting them all out of the same material. There's such a snowballing effect of the problems that we were trying to fix in this release. And they're all really centered back to this whole like how do materials work and how do textures interact with materials. So if I'm harping on about this, it's for a very valid reason, because these things I don't want to understate or underplay like how important they are. Let's have a look at cut list, right? So when we jump into the cut list, what you're going to see, I'm just going to filter just by this room, just so it's really clear. You're going to see I've got 3 materials. I've got a Polytech 16mm cinder matte, and I've got a Polytech 16mm coastal oak wood matte. So remembering that all I did was change the texture. I've only got one material and one material template, and I've simply just changed the texture of these, and it spawned a new material for each of these, meaning that now I can take that through to my optimizer and send it to my machine, and I'm not going to make a mistake. And it's kind of like you can't make a mistake, right? Because it is spawning the material automatically for you based on what you're changing in your textures. So, it's like the whole concept of this, we want it to be, when you're on elevation or when you're on your 3D view, what you see is what you get. Have you edged the doors? Like I haven't selected edge banding. Super clear, I can see that. I'm showing the core material of the color, so I haven't selected my banding. Okay, it's like the visual impact of these changes are not just for someone that's design focused. It's also for people that are focused on manufacturing the right thing, cutting it once, not twice, and that's where I'm going with all of this, right? I think that's like the kind of big takeaway. I'm sure there's probably things there that I've missed in like what's changed in materials, but I think overall you get the idea. And again, remembering that Bill's going to kind of go through a more detailed explanation on each of these features, but it does give you the concept of like why we've changed the materials, what's improved in the 3D viewer, what's improved in the cloud rendering, or like the new cloud rendering option that just didn't exist previously. I'm going to also touch on a quick one here for Cyncly Payments. So I will point out that Cyncly Payments is a brand new option, and it's currently limited to customers in America or the US. It will be, expanded to more regions soon, but for now, introduction into with customers in the States. So now, how does it work? Well, in your pricing, you've got the information here. Just go ahead and what you'll notice, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and change. You got to have like your registration set to United States for this to work, for you to see this. But I'm going to go ahead and just select a little quote, and you're going to see on the side down the bottom right hand corner here, Cyncly Payments, learn more. You click that button, it's going to take you to a website that's going to explain it in a lot more detail that I can show you in this video without like kind of full access to show you, but we will be releasing specific videos on that website directly on that content, which will make a lot more sense. But what it is really a payment option. So like, think of it like this, that you might not be using like a QuickBooks or, something in your business where you can send invoices to your customers and collect payments. This is a real great option for you to take your quote from Mozaik and request an invoice and generate simply in like a couple of clicks, generate a payment link for your customer where they can pay you a deposit, pay you the full amount. You can set the rules, and it's so easy. It's, scanning a QR code, or it's receiving a payment link and doing that. And it's all built into Mozaik. So I think overall, that's going to open up doors for a lot of people that perhaps aren't, using some sort of invoicing system, or even if you are, potentially this is still going to be a quicker, easier option, especially if you're a designer out on site designing and you just, you want to lock someone in and get them to commit. You can generate a payment link, bang, they can scan it on their phone right then and there, pay your deposit, walk away. It just gives you that extra level of control. And so more on Cyncly Payments, have a look at the website. You're going to learn a lot more about it there. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. We can always explain more as well. So reach out as well if you have any questions on that one. Now, let's jump into another area that's changed in pricing while I'm at it. And then we're going to circle into CAD, because CAD's one of the showstoppers of this release, and I really want to get to that. Hopefully you've skipped ahead to CAD if that's what interests you in this video. But statuses, right? So statuses, I've got the ability here to control, like if my status is a quote, and it will generate a quote number, or it's at invoice stage, or it's paid, or it's partially paid. It'll explain to you, like it'll lock the price you didn't run if you go ahead and do that. So depending on what you want to do. But then also in your settings, you're going to have the ability to control your quote format names. You can have a long format name, a short, or completely custom. And when you go to custom, you've got this option. I'm just going to move this over here to control like the name in convention using all of these different variables to get and that's available at everyone. Like this bit here where you've got your statuses and your quoting numbers and your invoicing numbers, everyone can utilize that. So really cool, a new addition to pricing. So let's come back to products and let's take a look now. We're going to pivot into the import updated data, and then I'm going to finish on CAD. So let's jump into tools and look at import updated data. Now, this has been improved dramatically. It's like, first of all, you can filter via your region, so if you're in APAC or Australian Pacific and you want to filter to just the things for APAC, you can go ahead and select that. You've got international or just all. So you've got different regions there that you can filter from. And again, we're still in the sort of setup phase of this. But you've also then got ability to like browse in to see, what is available to download. So really cool. You can get into things like draw guides, and you're going to see all the different draw guides available. Again, filtered via your region. These will all kind of update. You've got images. There's a lot of sort of content that's in the process of being added and come in here. And some of these things just take a second to load because they're all stored on a secure cloud platform for us here at Mozaik, where we can update these things on the fly. But the cool thing is, like, if you want to add something, like maybe you want to add like a specific product from the brand new appliances and graphics library, which I haven't touched on yet. But, let's say you want to add this dishwasher, and maybe you want to add like a something else from the library, whatever it is, and you can give these things a little minute and they'll kind of load. But I'm just going to add a couple of things here and then press import. A little dialog will appear and ask you, where do you want to import them? So I might go, look, I'm going to put them in my CADmate library, and then go ahead and press OK. And then those things are going to import directly into my library. So the cool thing there is that you can browse something that's in one of our libraries and download that straight into your library. Again, like just another layer of like what's improved dramatically there. But we're also adding like, material texture groups, product libraries entirely, which means like that entire product library could be just downloaded and plugged in if you don't have it, and we're adding to these things. So this is going to be a constant work in progress for us, meaning that like as new options come out, new hardware, new suppliers, inserts have been added to this as well, which means then we've got the ability to send out inserts to you guys, or like make inserts available, like the Bloom inserts and things like that. You can just browse these things and then drop them in. So plug and play download center, like that's, it's just, and you can search for these things. So if you're looking for something specific, you can type it into the search function there and search for this. So overall, like the import updated data is just such an improved experience. Again, this is like difficult to display or demo at the moment as we're still adding the images and adding the functionality in the background. So expect to see this improve dramatically over the coming weeks and months. But if you're downloading Mozaik or you're updating, we are going to suggest that you go there and get a couple of things. I'm going to put out a really short, specific video on that shortly as well. And just to touch on that, like the kind of key things we're going to suggest downloading would be things like your templates, like layer templates. So having a really clean, updated layer template sent to the multi-print font points that I mentioned in this video. Things like in product libraries, downloading the new appliances and graphics library that have all the visuals all ready to render, preset, so they can pull the materials and the appearances of those SketchUp models from the right places. There's just going to be a few little things like that you're going to want to import and get updated, like texture groups as well is another one. So import updated data, really big improvement there. Now, let's take a look at CAD. I'm going to actually just jump into something here, and I'm going to show you, let's just do a new room. This is probably the easiest way to sort of explain this, right? I'm just going to draw just a standard wall, and we're going to go to products, and we're going to go into elevation. Now, You'll see this on floor plan and on elevation. There's a brand new button in the top right hand corner called CAD. Click on CAD, and then you'll see a CAD toolbar menu appear across the top. Now, you've got a bunch of keyboard shortcuts as well. So you can either use the icon to click on the option that you want, or you can use keyboard shortcuts, which if you hover over the icon, it'll sort of explain what the keyboard shortcut is. Like this one's locked to L for polyline. Now, I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut as I think it's like super intuitive and easy to use. I'm going to go ahead and just draw a pretty classic example of why you might want to draw CAD to help you set out something, right? And a really good example of that would be like an understair set of cabinets. Okay, so on this job, I've gone out and I've measured 3.5 meter wall, 2.4 meters tall, and I'm going to go L for line. I'm going to start on the bottom of my point here, and on side I measured that I wanted to come across 800 millimeters. So I'm going to type 800 and press enter. That's going to give me my endpoint, and then from there I know that I want to come up and start at 2100, and that's going to give me my next point. Now, for my next point, I know that actually it's 500 off that side of the wall. So I'm actually going to press escape to stop drawing a line. And I'm going to come and click on this side of the wall, come back. You can actually see it snaps to every 10 millimeters. So if I wanted, I could like just move my mouse until I saw 500 and then click, or I could type the amount, whatever's easier. And from there, I'm going to come up, let's say 1 meter and press enter. And then from there, I'm going to want to connect those two lines. Okay, so then I'm going to press escape. And I can press spacebar to get out of that add-in line mode. So once you get used to the keyboard shortcuts, it's just so intuitive and quick to utilize this. I can click on that overall line, and you can see I've got a line here, 2 lines there, and I've got 3 lines there. Now I'm going to do something here. I'm going to highlight all of these lines, and then I'm going to right click on the lines, and I'm going to press explode. Reason for that, I actually don't really want the lines at the bottom anymore. I just kind of want these other 3 lines. And then what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to highlight those lines. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say I want to group them or join them together actually. So I'm going to join them. So now that's just technically one line with all those points. And now I'm going to right click. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to press O for offset. Okay, I'm going to offset that in. I'm going to say come in 50 millimeters for like a, maybe there's like a shadow at the top and a filler either side, whatever it is. You can press reverse direction if you want it to go the other way, but I'm going to come inside. And I'm going to leave make copy turned on, meaning I'm not moving my original. I'm copying the original to make a copy. Again, you get the the visual element of this, like in the magenta sort of color there, showing you that where the line's going to go, that it is a copy versus moving the line. It's just all these things make it so much quicker and easier to understand. And that's just made a copy of that line 50 millimeters inside. I'm going to press L for line again. And I'm going to click on that first snap point and go to this point. Actually, I think I missed the first one, so I'm going to do that again. So there I go. I've got a line, and I'm going to right click on that line now, and I'm actually going to divide that. I'm going to right click and go divide, and I want to divide it into 3 equal segments. You'll see there that gives me my node points. I'm going to press L for line, select my first node point, and then go up. You'll see the intelligent snapping. As soon as I get anywhere close near it being like perpendicular or parallel line, bang, just click and snap, right click to exit that, and then again click, and I've got a nice straight line that intersects with the other line perfectly. Now from there, I've got basically these like segments or spaces where I want to make my cabinet. So I want to put a cabinet in this space here and here. Okay, so now I'm just going to go to my library. I'm going to take just a standard tall cabinet, drag and drop. As soon as I drop it into that space, you're going to see this option appear that says conform product to enclosing annotation shape. All it means is do you want to make that product the same shape as the area that you're dropping it into? So then just go ahead and click yes, and away it goes. And you can see automatically shapes perfectly to the shape of that containing space. And do that again, drop one in, click yes, drop one in, click yes. And so quickly you can, it gets you like 90% of the way there. Sure, you're going to go in and probably move some shelves and adjust some hinges and that kind of thing. But overall, that's shaped that cabinet and got you, ready to manufacture that at a crazy quick speed, So that's just something that's super cool. And, it's pretty damn flexible in terms of what you can shape. They're the practical examples. I mean, that's really what it's designed for. I'm just going to show you, something, I guess, something less, practical, I guess you would say. So let's just jump into CAD. I'm going to just draw a line here. I'm going to start down there and I don't know, something a little bit random. And I missed that bottom point there, but good thing is you can grab those nodes and you can move them, and they really snap super easy. So like afterwards you can kind of click on this and still move your node points around to get the shape that you're going for. Again, very random shape, but let's just give it a go. Right click, drop our product in, bang, there it is. There's the shape. Of course you're going to want to go and then tell Mozaik like how you want to make that, right? Because it's going to make some assumptions like that's a left end, that's a left end, that's a top, that's a right end, that's a bottom, that's a bottom. It's going to do its best job at assuming like kind of what you want those faces to be. But of course we don't really know what you're designing. So like you're going to want to go ahead and tell Mozaik like what you want these things to be. Maybe you want them to be unfinished ends versus, scene ends, that kind of thing, so like you can go through and you can define these things how you want. Of course you can then go in and define if you want to split these sections up, and it's all still Mozaik, so it's still flexible, changeable. You can go ahead and put your shelves in and build these things as you please. So overall, like I think that's going to give you an idea that this is something that's so powerful and flexible, and yeah, it just gives you the ability. I mean, obviously I'm going to want to change my hinges and that kind of thing, but I just think overall I'm just trying to explain like the flexibility that this gives you to really define shapes and create things on the fly. So you've also got the ability to do all of that from your floor plan as well, whether you'd want to, go ahead and draw a shape in your floor plan and then shape it from that top-down perspective too. I've done a kind of really random example, and I'm sure Michael's going to probably kill me for showing this, but just, to sort of highlight, I guess, where the flexibility of this sort of starts and finishes. It really, like, I guess it needs to be a enclosed shape. So if you think about like the word Mozaik, like the M, the Z, the I, the K are all enclosed shapes, whereas the A is like a shape within a shape, and that's where the limitations are at the moment. So like, you're not going to be able to drag something into the O and have it shape, because there's really two shapes. It's not like one shape that's continuous and every point intersects. So in this case, the M, the Z, the A, the I, the K, I can go ahead and drag and drop a product into, and I can get a pretty damn good cabinet built that shape. So I just wanted to kind of like highlight like what this, and just how this works. Like obviously I can just take my base cabinet and I can just drag and drop that in, say yes, and away it goes. It's like, that is such a flexible, powerful thing. And then you can go in and change, like how it's built and everything like that. But I think I just wanted to kind of give you that example just as not why it's designed, but just get you thinking about like, how far you could potentially stretch this and what you could do with it. Pretty game changing. So that's the shape to CAD function, but let's go back to a more kind of practical example. I'm going to open up a job, looks like a little small vanity job here, and we're going to take a look at this one. Let's say, I think, yeah, this is probably the right copy of it. Maybe it's copy one, doesn't really matter. For this use case, I'm just going to show you what we've got here. So let's say, you're wanting to annotate this, right? Actually, I'm going to flick back across to the other one. And let's say, you wanted to annotate this. Well, maybe you're going to go into CAD and you're going to do things like, maybe put a leader and say, maybe I want to annotate like that point there is, a 150 millimeter radius end, something like that, Of course, so, you can go ahead and you can drop that in. Of course, you can click on that and you can change the size and the color and all those things as well. So, if you want to go ahead and, reduce your text size, you can do that so it fits on the scene. You've got the ability to add dimensions. You've even got the ability to hide dimensions as well, which is pretty cool. So you could, and like I'll kind of explain this once let's get out of the CAD for a second. Let's just right click on this one and we're going to say hide dimension. So that's hiding that one individual dimension, so maybe like having the meter either side there, maybe you actually don't know that that's what it is. You know, maybe like the 3.5 meters is actually kind of like something that you're not 100% sure of, or maybe that's the bit that can change, or maybe you just don't want to display that for whatever reason. Hide it. You can right click and hide it. You can also right click and, you know, change text on these. So you can override the text and you could say like confirm on site, you know, something like that, right? So you can also override text, which is really cool. You can add, so back into the CAD function for a second, you've got the ability to add your own dimensions as well, add text boxes. Again, these all have the, like, you know, D for dimensions. So say I want to specifically, for some reason, dimension like what the distance from that point is to say this point, and get that, you know, on a nice perspective. Well, go ahead and you know, do that as you please. And then you can, of course, like click on, with that selected, you can still change the color and the appearance and everything like that. You can also color it via layer. So like I could have color via layer ticked on for these options. And what that means is, like, it depends on what layer I'm using. Is this a shop note or a customer note? And then in your layers, you know, and this is just how I've set it up. You can control this how you like, but, you know, I'm going to say, let's say shop notes are actually red. You know, I don't want the guys on the factory floor to miss them. I want them to be super clear, you know, and then that means that's a shop note that doesn't, you know, it's for the guys on the factory floor. It's not for the customer. And what that means is in my multi-print, I can have that layer turned off. So anything that I do here, you know, like for example, this one, I could have that on the customer notes. I could write that in the customer notes area. So that way, you know, that's always going to appear in the customer notes. And again, I can have the customer notes as a different color. So really, like, a lot of things that are going to enhance the overall ability to not just draw something, you know, but fill spaces. Like all these different CAD tools are going to give you the ability to draw things, but then also, you know, uniting the like product space. Like think of it like uniting the elevations and the floor plan with multi-print, like, was a huge undertaking for us. Like it is like they were two completely different worlds, and now we've united them into one world, meaning that now when I go and I look at this room, I think I was in room 1 and I can't remember the wall number, but yep, wall number 2. I'm going to drag and drop this onto the scene. It means that I'm seeing the same thing in here, right? And you can, of course, change scale and do all those things like usual. But the amazing bit about this is if I want to change this in multi-print and double click and you go, you know what, I'm going to actually change that, and I'm going to, you know, right click on that and I'm going to edit it, or I'm going to re-pull it, or I'm going to, you know, maybe I want to move it over to the side here or something like that. You know, whatever it is, any change you make, maybe I want to add another leader and just say, you know, this is going to be a mirror door, you know, and maybe I want to make another note to say that these are recessed into wall, something like that, right? Again, all of these things are editable, changeable. You know, maybe I want to change my layers and actually just turn off the door annotations, because, you know, having them on a radius doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I can go through and do that as well. And, you know, maybe I'll just turn off my door swings in this particular view as well. So depending on where you are, you can go through and change all those things. But this, what you're doing here in multi-print, if you go back to your products tab and you go to the elevation here, is you're changing the same thing. So you're now, you know, these, think of them as a live environment where, you know, what you're doing in one is interacting the other. Yes, you can make the multi-print a static image if you please, but this is going to change the way you use multi-print, because it means that you're going to do everything in your floor plan and elevation. You're going to put all your notes in, you're going to put all your annotations, you're going to put everything here. And then, you know, like, you're not missing something because you're spending all your time in the products tab, and that's where you want to put this information. And really multi-print is about, like, it's just about presenting that in a method to your customer that makes sense. You know, maybe you want to have multiple things of this on the same, you know, on the same page and that kind of thing, like moving these things around. You've also point out, you know, you can press M for move or use the move option. And let's say I just want to move this up 500. You know, you've got the ability to, like, utilize that translate/move tool now in multi-print, and, you know, really kind of shift your things around based on a certain perspective. So you've got that functionality too. Like, I think overall, when we sat down and looked at like, well, what are people wanting as multi-print improvements? Like, really, what are you trying to do? And a lot of it came back to you're trying to visually show the right colors so visually looked correct in elevation. You're trying to also visually kind of show dimensions in a cleaner, more consistent way. And getting these things, obviously mine are not set up perfectly at the moment, but I'm probably going to go, reduce font sizes and things like that to get that dialed in. Again, that's the whole drawing settings area to help you get all those things dialed in the way you want. You've got the ability to kind of just dial this in and control this down to the information that you want to send out and to show to your end customer. Maybe you want to turn off things like the finished end cabinet labels. In cabinet labels, you might want to just turn off the end labels. You might not want to show the sizes, opening sizes, and all those kinds of things. All of that can be dialed back and shown to the level of detail that you want. But overall, adding the ability to add annotations, the ability to control these things, ability to have different layers and and options, and better control over dimensions, hiding individual dimensions, editing individual dimensions, all of that ties together to just give you overall a more professional looking multi-print experience that you can send to your customer. And overall, I think this is such a huge step in that direction of achieving that. And I hope you can utilize this in a really efficient way. While we're in multi-print, I'll also point out that in your libraries, you've now got the ability also to import in, if you've got any kind of like list, item lists, custom tables. So perhaps like, if you're using a custom table, like, door and drawer box sizes or door parts or, anything in the report editor that you've used, you can just drag and drop that out into this space. So you can show cut lists and custom tables, and they can be, from previous versions, as you probably know, they can do a lot of things for you. So you've got the ability to drag and put them into the elevations, into your multi-print now as well. So that covers most of it. There are like so many other little small ones, but I'm conscious of how long this video already is. So I don't want to, risk dragging it out too long for everyone, but I just will touch on a couple of those for anyone interested that's still watching at this point. You've got the ability now in your products that you can set a product to appear above the wall cabinet. So in the snap to options, you got above wall cabinet as a snap to option, meaning that like, for a bulkhead or something like that you want to come in over the top of a wall cabinet, you can set that rule. You've got the, let's just look at something. I might even just do a new room here and look at just one cabinet. And let's pick like the end of the cabinet, and we'll just override like one end, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and say, you know what? I'm going to pick, say, again, I haven't gone through and like completely tidied up all my materials, but I wanted to give you a pretty accurate representation of how that's going to come through for you if you're upgrading. And I'm just going to say, let's say something with a pretty obvious grain I want to sort of show. Let's say this one. Right. Let's see if we can see that in perspective. Okay, cool. So now, what I want to show you, and this isn't a seamless texture yet, so you're seeing the repeat of that, but they'll be available to download very shortly, seamlessly from our import updated data. Now, what I want to show you is quite a simple change here, but one that I think is going to be fairly flexible as well. Or I think a lot of people are going to appreciate. So let's just put this to the side and this to here. And let's go ahead and press edit on this. All I'm going to do is just rotate that 90 degrees. Now what you can see is that the grain is still going along the length of the part. Previously that would have changed the grain to go up and down. So grain was previously like the parts are drawn. Right now the way it works is the parts are drawn, grain's applied, and then it's rotated. Okay, it used to be drawn, rotated, then grain applied. So the rotation was happening before the grain was applied. And that's not a true representation of how it's going to nest. So now it's a true representation of how you're going to get that part off the nest. And then right down to the level of I can do a diagonal component. I can have that part on a diagonal and the grain still running along the length of the part as it would, because that's how you're actually going to cut it out of the sheet, right? So we've really just overhauled that to improve that to be, I guess more what you see is what you get. Again, fitting the overall theme of version 14. So that's something that's changed. If I go into my one of my rooms as well, I'll just show you this in 3D. So you've also got like the ability to export this to SketchUp as you always have. So previously, the SketchUp export, it's improved a fair bit. For anyone that's like not using SketchUp, this is not going to make a difference to you. But if you are using SketchUp, I guess one of the things I wanted to point out, I'm not actually logged in, but I'll just explain it. One of the things that I wanted to point out was that you have now the ability, anything that you show in Mozaik will now come through into SketchUp. Previously, the limitations were really around like, maybe if you had applied molding, you would see that in Mozaik, but you wouldn't see it in SketchUp. We're now like applying, I think the technical term is like we're exporting like meshes or 3D meshes of these faces, which means you're getting a true representation of all of the meshes and faces in Mozaik in SketchUp. So overall that like integration's been improved as part of that version 14 upgrade. Other little things like the door cutouts and doorways in Mozaik will no longer show like the little join-in piece between, so it'll show you a nice clear cut through of that there as well. Room notes is something I haven't touched on. So in settings, you've now got the ability to define room notes, and you can manage your own fields and create your own option lists there as well. So you can call that what you like and determine, whether that's a combo box or a checkbox, or so you've got the ability to define your own room notes and then call them up. So that's perfect for like specification sheets, things like what are the handles set to maybe, or like what are the appliances set to, anything like that you've got control over. In your elevations and floor plans, you've now got the ability with your notes as well to either show the background, yes or no. So you can have transparent notes. So for example, if I put one there, I can have it transparent, which is really cool, or I can format that and maybe show the background and then choose what my background color is. So more control over your notes and how you would like them to look and feel as well. Little changes like metal draw parts, are now shown on the assembly lists. There's the top scribe for a wall reference parameter now applies to wall and tall cabinets. So there is like a lot of other little ones that have sort of crept its way into version 14 as well. Actually, like one for me that's a personal favorite is if I jump into my labels, and in my label designer, I'd sort of recommend everyone's going to want to turn this on if you're using nested labels, is you've now got in the drawings the ability to have a part drawing with the banding image. What that means is that it's actually going to write the abbreviated banding name on there. So rather than just like E1, it'll be like, whatever the banding image name is. So, and you can control that then in your abbreviated field of your material library. So massive improvement there, because it just gives the guy on the edge bander a lot more clarity as to what type of edge tape he's actually putting on each specific edge. So, overall, I'm sure there's other little things that I've missed, but I think I've sort of hit the highlights and talked through the majority of them, and I've spoken for way too long and taken way too much of your time up. So I won't keep going, but hopefully you've got something out of this video. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are on version 14. Look forward to everyone downloading it, using it, and we're going to be, at Ligna next week. Come see us if you're in Germany for the Ligna show. We're going to be at AWFS in Las Vegas in end of July. If you're at that show, come and see us. Let us know your thoughts on version 14. We'll give you a walkthrough of it if you haven't seen it already. We're also going to be at the Design/Kitchen and Bath show in Melbourne in Australia in the start of June as well. So if you're in any of those shows, come by, introduce yourself. Would love to have a chat and get to know you and hear your feedback. So as always, thank you for watching, and thanks for downloading version 14.